Good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone to the special memorial service for Lady Eshinni, who was the wife of Shinran Shonin, and Lady Kakushinni, who was the youngest daughter of Shinran Shonin and Eshinni. Both women were amazing in their strength, their intelligence, their ability to make possible what we have today as Jodo Shinshu, as a sect. Lady Eshinni was a landowner who ran a very large farm in a remote area of Japan, and it's made possible Shinran Shonin's, ability to continue as our founder, by being able to have that land up in Echigo. And Lady Kakushinni, who was the youngest daughter, it's amazing because she established the tradition. She had established the administrative sort of structure of Jodo Shinshu Buddhism. And Lady Kakushinni, and I read that, she is the first Rusushiki, which is now called the abbot or Monshu of the Jodo Shinshu Honganji. So we are, it's something to think about because we always think about men starting this. But why we continue to exist is because of these two women. We also use this service to honor our BWA, Buddhist Women's Association members who have passed away this year. So I'm going to read their names. They were so active in the temple. First, Irene Takemori, who passed away on March 16, 2023. Lorada Hisako Inoue, who passed away on May 1st, 2023. And Sachiko Hamada, who passed away on August 28, 2023. It is these women, Buddhist Women's Association women, who make possible, our temple to thrive and to, by being so active and supporting the temple. Now we're going to go ahead and start with sutra chanting. We will do Sambutsuge, page 33 in your Orange County Shin Buddhist Service Book. And in the meantime, I think we will also, during the chanting, we will ask representatives to come up and offer incense.
Busatsu Daimoryo Jukyo Sanbutsuge Kogen Gigi Ijin Mugoku Yode Enmyo Muyo Tocha Nishigatmani Shuko Enyo Kaishnonpe.
Could we have incense offering from the Buddhist representative from the Buddhist Women's Association?
Shogaku Dayon, Koru Jipo, Komon Shojin, Sammai Chie, Itoku Muryo, Shusho Keiyu, Juntai Rennen, Shobuten Hokai, Gujin Jinno, Kugon Gaitai, Mumyo Yokunu,
Pasadena Buddhist Temple. If I could have Donna Mitoma come up.
Kukun Kodai, Chie Jinmyo, Komyo Iso, 신돈 다이센 간가사붓 다이쇼호 가도쇼지 미흑게닷 부세조이 카이닌 쇼진 땀마이치에 이토쿠 무료 쿠콘다요 구요 이사이 시토 쇼붓 푸뇨 구도 켄쇼 흥야쿠 인용 오랴 쇼붓 세카이 무후카게 무슈 떼տն도 토묘 시쇼 켄시쇼 코쿠 뇨데 쇼진 이진 안려 yoga sabutn kukdo daichi goshu kimyo dojo chozetn kokunyo nayon nimu toso gato aimin dodatn isai jipo raisho shinnetn shojo itoga koku keiraku anon kobutten shinmyo zega shinsho otsugan nohi rikisho shoyoku jipo seison shie muge joryo shison shiga shingyo keiryo shinshi shoku dokuchu gagyo shojin Ninju Fuke Namanabu 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 Gani Shikudoku Yodo sei isai no honai shin onyo namanda burmanda namanda 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 burmanda namo amira butsu namanda butsu namo amira butsu Namanda Butsu.
Okay. Will the Sangha please rise for Gatha? It will be Seiya, page 152. 152. Thank you. If you could remain standing, and we will have a reflective reading by Reverend Gibbs. It'll be The Three Treasures on page 10.
So we're going to do this one out loud. The Three Treasures from page 10. How rare and wondrous it is to have been born into human life, and now I live it. How rare and wondrous it is to be able to listen to the Buddha Dharma, and now I am able to hear it. If I do not transcend the world of delusion in this life, when will I ever attain spiritual liberation? May I, along with the entire Sangha, with sincere heart and mind, rely on that which can be truly relied on in life, the three treasures. I rely on the Buddha. May I, along with all sentient beings,
awaken to the great path with my entire being and discover the highest aspiration, which is to become a Buddha. I rely on the Dharma. May I, along with all sentient beings, deeply reflect on the meaning of sutras and gain wisdom that is vast and vast as the ocean. I rely on the Sangha. May I, along with all sentient beings, become one Sangha life, able to move forward and live with a dynamic spirit that is hindered by nothing.
The unsurpassed, deep, and wondrous Dharma, even in millions of kalpas, is extremely difficult to encounter. But now I'm able to experience and embrace it. May I come to understand and revere the true meaning of the Tathagata. Namo Amida Butsu.
Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu.
Namo Amida Butsu.
If you could please be seated. Sensei will proceed with his Dharma message today, but I also want to thank all the people who made this service possible. And that would be, of course, Sensei, our organist, Kathy Kumagai, and the beautiful flowers, Kyoko Okura Gibbs, and the streaming of the service, Alan Goto and Kathy Kumagai. Thank you very much for helping us today.
Yes, thank you, Kathy. Thanks for chairing the service. Let me mention a couple more people we want to thank. Also, we must thank the Buddhist Women's Association, in particular Jeannie and Joni for preparing the food for us today, and Linda. And again, let me thank Alan Goto for the videography and tech support, Kathy Kumagai, organist and tech support, my wife Kyoko for flowers and hygiene preparation, which myself being rather sloppy takes a lot of her time to clean up after me. Now this morning's service is multi-themed. We are remembering our deceased friends in the Buddhist Women's Association, and in the past year, particularly those we lost in the last year, and we have lost in the last year, Lorada Hisako Inoue, Irene Takemori, and Sachiko Hamada. We're also commemorating Eshinni, our denominational founder's wife, and Kakushinni, his youngest daughter, who were two very important women leaders in our denomination in the 13th century. I also want to highlight the general concern for equality. These two women represent a transition from female roles that were very traditional to the empowerment of women. Shinran Shonin's strong wife, Eshinni, was a woman leader of her family. Their youngest daughter, Kakushinni, was a strong woman leader of our denomination. We're not entirely sure when Eshinni and Shinran met. The dominant theory now is that they met in Kyoto at the turn of the 13th century when they were both studying with Honen. She would have been about 20 at the time, and he was about 30. We do know that they were married. And I mention this every year, but it's just remarkable to me that in the early 20th century, somebody questioned whether Eshinni really existed. And they said, well, sure she existed. What are you talking about? I said, no, prove it. So they went to Niigata, and they looked for a wedding license that was Shinran and Eshinni, and they couldn't find it. And then they remembered that she had a given name. Eshinni is a nun's name. Neither Eshinni nor Kakushinni were known by those names in their life. You only put ni on the end of your name if you're a Japanese aristocrat when your husband passes. So anyway, she was known as Miyoshi at that time, and they finally looked up, they found the wedding license, and there it was, their wedding license from, I have the year written down here, 1210. 1210. It was still on file in Niigata. It was in a box, no doubt, but they found it. Can you imagine? My family's from Ireland. I'm not sure what part of Ireland, the south part of Ireland, but I'm sure if I went to Ireland, County Canada, wherever we're from, and said, you know, my forefathers, they were married here in 1210. Do you have a copy of the wedding license? They would look at me like I was out of my mind, you know, but they actually found it. It was on file. They don't throw anything away in Japan. So, yeah, they did find this wedding license of Eshinni and Shinran from the year 1210. Now, currently you have on your program, you have, on the back, you have Reverend Tetsuo Uno's retelling of the story of Eshinni dreaming that she had a dream and she was in the presence of the Buddha, and there were other people, and then there was a bodhisattva to the right of the Buddha, a luminous bodhisattva. And so in the dream, she turns to the person next to her and says, who is that bodhisattva standing next to the Buddha? And the person standing next to her says, that's Shinran. And so it's also interesting that she never told him about the dream. But she told her daughter Kakushinni, and that's why we know about this dream. Eshinni wrote a letter to her daughter Kakushinni and said that she'd had this dream of Shinran being a bodhisattva, but that she'd never told him about it. Now, this was the 13th century of the Common Era. Eshinni was a strong, educated woman, and when he was 60, Shinran went back to Kyoto to write books and to undergird the Nembutsu path. And he stayed there for 30 years. And remember now, he was 60 years old when he went to Kyoto in the 13th century, so he probably figured he had a few years, right? He had 30 more years. He probably had no expectation of living that long and having 30 years. And most of what he did so far, he wrote a few new books in Japanese. First time anyone wrote a significant Buddhist book in Japanese was Shinran. Everyone wrote in Chinese until he was in his 80s. In his 80s, Shinran started to write the first literature in the Japanese language by Buddhist teachers. When he was 60, he'd written this book when he was 52, his masterpiece. And then when he was 60, he went back to Kyoto, and we think what he spent most of his time doing was like going to this temple and that temple. Komyo, do you have a copy of the Daimyo? Oh yeah, okay, let me check. He was just checking his quotations. And he did emend them when there was like a preposition off or something like that. And he spent 30 years doing that, and in those 30 years, again, they probably didn't think it would be that long, but Eshinni had to run the family business. Eshinni ran a large, busy family farm. Remember, this was between the ages of 50 and 80. She's doing this work in her 70s, you know. And Shinran was off doing scholarly work that they both considered important, but she had to manage the family business for him while he did that. And while Shinran was composing insightful, worthwhile texts for the ages, Eshinni had to deal with many sticky, difficult matters. Now, several of her letters discuss this thing that came up, that this is medieval Japan, right? So one of her female servants became pregnant, and she was impregnated by a servant in the household down the road, the boy next door. So they have a protocol for that at that time. If your servant, these aren't slaves, they're what we'd call indentured servants, and when your female servant becomes pregnant, that means she moves to the household of her husband. She marries the man that she's having the baby with and goes, that means you lose a hand on the farm. So it's a big issue, you know. Means basically you have to pull somebody out of the household staff to plant rice, which is a big shock to them, no doubt, if they've been on the household staff all that time. So, you know, as people who probably don't have servants and never have, it may be hard for us to relate to how difficult this was, but this is the kind of thing she was doing. Shinran probably wouldn't have been too good at this. You know, what do you do when your servant becomes pregnant by somebody from another household? Well, she dealt with that kind of thing. And for 30 years, again, she was the leader of her family business. And in this 30-year period, one of her sons died and one of her daughter-in-laws died. So she had to take care of those grandchildren, plus doing stuff like deciding how much we're willing to spend on rice seed this month and how much we need to, what livestock we might sell off, all those kind of decisions. She was also raising her grandchildren. Now, Eshinni was a 13th century woman from an aristocratic family with a brilliant, radical, revolutionary, egalitarian husband. Eshinni didn't do theory. That wasn't her thing. That was her husband's expertise. She was a deep devotee of the Nembutsu, Namo Amida Butsu, of encountering the Buddha's vow through saying the Buddha's name, Namo Amida Butsu. But she didn't write books. She was taking care of the family business so that he could do that. Eshinni did stuff like buying seeds and selling rice, selling farm animals, negotiating business deals, and she kept the family afloat. She certainly believed in the vision of her husband, but articulating that spiritual vision was Shinran's work. Her work was keeping him alive. And in that devotion to her husband, I am reminded of our friend Sachiko Hamada. We have the three ladies that passed away this year that we miss. Irene Takemori, who, as I mentioned, reminds me more of Kakushinni, and Sachiko Hamada, who really reminds me of Eshinni in this matter that she was, as you know, deeply devoted to her husband. I don't think I ever had a conversation with Sachi Hamada when she did not mention her husband, who's been deceased for, 20 years? But she was devoted. I'll tell you one thing about Lorada Hisaku Inoue. We don't know a lot about her because she was 102 when she passed on, so not many of us were the same generation. But Lorada, heard that name before? Lorada? She invented it. That's female empowerment, right? A Japanese-American woman 100 years ago chose her own name. That's pretty unusual. Didn't go down that way. And she invented the name. Nobody ever had that name before. So yeah, we have a bit of a echoing in our BWA membership of what we see in these two important women leaders. And I remember when both Irene and Sachi passed away, the last several times I visited them, they both said, "I'm ready." But Irene said, "I'm ready." Sachiko said, "I'm ready to join my husband." Every time she said it that way. And you know I believe she did. I have no doubt she's joined her husband in a realm of light. And I wouldn't be surprised if those were Eshinni's last words. We don't have her last words. She would have been ready too. Eshinni shared the egalitarian, inclusive, accepting religious vision of Shinran, and she was a devoted wife. Their youngest daughter, Kakushinni, was also deeply devoted to Shinran. She nursed him in his illness and was at his bedside when he passed away. Her mother administered the family farm, took care of the family business. Kakushinni administered her father's denomination of Buddhism. Kakushinni, in the 13th century, directed the development of Jōdo-Shinshu School of Buddhism. Kakushinni oversaw the building of Shinran's grave site. At first, it was just a vault or a mausoleum. She turned it into a temple. She communicated with the members in the Kanto region to support the temple. They sent money, came and made visits. She set up the fundamental organization of our Buddhist denomination as a kind of representative democracy. And so she asked the members for permission to name the chief abbot out of her family each year, each generation. And they said yes, but she asked for permission. She did not just do it. And then there was a controversy that came up when she came to feel that she should step down and let her son take over, she was half the age of her mother. Her mother lived to be 80 and managed the farm up till 80. At 40, Kakushinni said, I've had, you take over. But she chose the younger son. She was widowed twice before her mid-30s. By her mid-30s, she'd been widowed twice. And she chose her younger son because she found him to be more capable and more devout. And there was some, we don't know a lot about it, but the older son, Yuizhen, had some backers. And there was a controversy, and she just championed through that. She just plowed on through that. He's the guy. And if we were going to do it this way. And again, our denomination remains one of the oldest representative democracies in the world, one of the oldest democratic systems in the world. At that time, 13th century, no other head of any Buddhist denomination was officially, in theory and in fact, answerable to the members. Our leaders are always answerable to you. She named that second son, Kakue, as the caretaker of the temple. That's all it meant back then, Rusuban. She was named Rusuban. It wasn't until, Rusuban means caretaker, and then it wasn't until 150 years later that they petitioned the government to say, could we call ourselves Rusushiki, which basically means honorable caretaker, right? And I myself know when, I think it was just after Renyo Shonin in the 15th century, that they moved to this term monshu, gatekeeper. But she is not acknowledged as one of the gatekeepers, and she should be. And she's the one who set this up as us being answerable to you, which wasn't the case in Buddhism prior to that. The monks were kind of the bosses. And I don't think there were any denominations of Christianity in the 13th century where the priests were answerable to the members, or the Pope was answerable to the members. So this is quite a new development. Kakushinni took control, assumed responsibility, and moved us forward to become advocates of equality, and not just in the pure realm, but advocates of equality here and now. While being a strong woman leader and a force for the empowerment of women, even as she believed and championed equality, she was never officially acknowledged as the Rusuban, and certainly not as Monshu. So that's something we have to fix later. If we're going to use that term Monshu, gatekeeper, she was our gatekeeper. We wouldn't be here without Kakushinni. And neither she nor Shinran would be here without Eshinni. They dumped Shinran, the scholar, on the beach in Niigata with a bag of rice seed in the winter. He was dead, dead on arrival. Someone takes care of him or he's dead. And we think that he already had a relationship with Eshinni from the days in Kyoto with Honen, but we're not sure. But it was because her family took him in that he survived. He would have just starved to death otherwise. Both of these women were very crucial to the development of our school of Buddhism and to the dissemination of an urge to empower women within the Buddha Dharma. And of course, we would not be here without the Pasadena Buddhist Temple's Buddhist Women's Association. And the BWA, the Women's Association, only exists because of people like Clarada Hisako Inoue, Irene Takemori, and Sachiko Hamada. I thank them for their efforts. I thank all of you for your efforts and for participating in this service. And if I may ask you in closing to join me in Gassho, we will say the Buddha's name a few times in closing the Dharma message portion of the service. We rely upon the source of limitless wisdom and endless life. Namo Amida Butsu, 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 Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you.
Thank you again, Sensei, for your wonderful message and to remind us of what we owe the women who came before us and the women today who keep this temple, really going and who've taken on leadership roles now in our temple. I'd just like to read a few quotes to you from this morning. I was looking for women. I'll start with Margaret Thatcher. She says, "If you want something said, ask a man. If you want something done, ask a woman." Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Women belong in all places where decisions are being made. It shouldn't be that women are the exception. And finally, Eleanor Roosevelt. Women are like tea bags. We don't know our true strength until we are in hot water. Namami Davatsu, Namami Davatsu, Namami Davatsu. Again, thank you for coming to the service. We're going to have some light refreshments in the classroom. And I think we have a few announcements. For example, like our bingo fundraiser. Yeah.
We're going to let Kathy do that. She has the details about
Yeah.
the rest of us. And we won't have too many other announcements. So
Right, and I think Marvin also has some announcements, so.
Good morning. As they mentioned, next Saturday is the Southern District Buddhist Conference, and it's going to be held here in Pasadena. We're going to be welcoming people from San Diego up to Oxnard. So we're co-hosting the event with Oxnard. For those who've registered, thank you. If you'd like to register, attend online, you can still do that. You can register to come in person still, because you're friends and family here. We can't guarantee there'd be a bento available to purchase, but of course, you're all welcome. And if you'd like to come in this week, maybe Tuesday or Thursday from 9 to noon, we're still kind of sprucing up and the appearance of our temple. And you're always welcome to come and help pull weeds in the garden over here and dust up. But we're excited that we're going to be able to host the Bishop of the Buddhist Churches of America, Marvin Harada, and a number of very wonderful speakers to come and talk to us next Saturday. And I think the other one that I can remember is save the date is November 18th for our bingo. And tickets are on sale online on our website. So feel free to come join us that day also.
Good morning. My name is Marvin Inoue. I just wanted to remind people also, the day after the bingo here on November 18th, on November 19th, Heart Mountain is having a luncheon get-together at the Japanese American National Museum. But prior to that, at the end of this month, October 26th, 27th, and 28th, there will be a in-person pilgrimage to Crystal City, Texas, which was also a concentration camp during World War II. So just wanted to remind you of that. And I think this weekend they're having, the Poston is having their pilgrimage in Parker, Arizona. Thank you.
Thank you again for everyone attending this service. If you haven't offered incense yet, please go up and do so. And please join us in the classroom for some light refreshments. So thank you again for coming to this service to honor all the women in our tradition. Thank you.